Hi and welcome back to the gwEmbassy. I'm gwEm. So today I wanted to cover my collection of Boss Dr.Rhythm drum machines. Here's the first one, the Boss DR-55, which came out in 1979. Now, a few years ago, I got kind of obsessed by these machines. I was really into the industrial design and how they evolved the line over time. In retrospect, I'd probably say my Dr.Rhythm obsession was a mistake. But actually, every single one had something cool about it. They're budget, they're fun, they're cheap and cheerful, but they all do sound pretty good. They're easy to use in their sort of weird, quirky way. So I thought it'd be fun, before I sell some of these on eBay, to do a rundown, take you through the industrial design that I was so interested in back a couple of years ago when I got all these things. And then you can see what you think and tell me what your favourites are. We'll start with the DR-55, released in 1979. And we'll finish with the DR-660, which was released in 1992. They have continued the line, and I'm sure they're carrying on in the tradition of budget but good quality sounds. Let's get into it. First up is the original Boss Dr.Rhythm, the Dr.Rhythm DR-55. So this came out in 1979, and it would have come in this rather cool looking Boss box. And imagine you are starting a new wave band. You buy that Boss Dr.Rhythm, you open it up, and this is what you're presented with. High quality metal case, really smooth knobs. You've got 8 patterns, 6 of them with 16 steps for your 4/4 rhythms. You've got a couple of 12-step patterns as well for your waltzes and so on. Now this machine is fully programmable, believe it or not. It is a bit of a faff to program it. I will talk you through that, but first let's talk about some of the sounds you can get. It has a bass drum, a snare drum, a rim shot, and some hi-hats. I'll just play you a beat so you get the idea. As you can hear, it sounds kind of like an old school organ rhythm box or something like that. The hi-hats are selectable once every 8th notes or once every 16th. And there's also a tone control. There's no other adjustment of the kind of timbre other than this, but it does work quite well. Let me show you how that works. It does work quite nicely just to tame the high end. There's also an accent feature which is controlled via a knob. This gives you some nice pump. Now this one has been modified with a Sync-24 input. Normally it would have a foot switch here for you to start and stop the drum machine remotely, but with this mod I can use Sync-24 and sync it to a 303, an 808 or other Roland gear. It also has 2 trigger outputs, one of which is driven by the accent and the other which just comes from the internal sequencer. Using this you can sync it to your Korg Volkers and other analog equipment. Each rhythm has 2 variations, A and B. You have 1 bar of A and another bar of B. That's A, this is B. So you can have B as a fill, or just a variation on the rhythm. There's also a middle setting, A-B, so it plays all of A and then all of B. Which gives you a nice 2-bar pattern. Programming this, as I say, is a little bit of a faff. So in order to write a pattern, first of all, you choose the one you want to write. So I've already cleared pattern 4, so we'll go to that. And you choose an instrument. In this case, I'm going to start with a snare, and I'm going to change from play mode to write mode. Now, in order to program the pattern, you use these 2 buttons here. This black dot one here is a rest, and then the lighter dot is the drum sound. So you have to cycle through each of the 16 steps. I'm going to program an offbeat snare, so you'll be able to see how this works. Let's start with 4 rests, then the snare, then another 7 rests, then a snare, then 2 rests and another snare, and you'll see that the tempo light has come on to indicate we've reached the end of the bar. So I'm going to switch from write to play, and we'll have a listen to what we've got. Let's do a bass drum now. Switch the sound to the bass drum, go into write mode. We're at the start of the bar. You have to count the beats. It becomes quite difficult to program if you're doing something complicated. But at least you can hear the other sounds in the background. Let's have a listen to that. That is actually what I wanted to program, so that's fantastic. Now for the rim shots, I'm not going to focus too much on what notes I program. I'm just going to go in and throw some random rim shots in there. And that is how you go about programming the Dr.Rhythm DR-55. This is an absolutely brilliant, fun machine. It runs on batteries as well, with that metal case. I mean, when you got this, it was a budget drum machine back in 1979, but you got value for money, that's for sure. This was high quality, very giggable product. I thought I'd show you a little bit of the case candy that you'd have got with your Boss Dr.Rhythm back in the 70s. It's the owner's manual. It's very well written, actually. It explains exactly how you play and write patterns. And check this out at the end, you've even got some example setups. If you happen to have a SH09 and a CSQ100 sequencer, you can use the DR-55 as a master clock for those. This sheet shows what rhythms would have been programmed in from the factory. And then there's another book here of rhythms for your Boss Dr.Rhythm. Rock, 12-step rock, a bit more of a shuffle there, I suppose. Disco would have been big in the 70s. Some waltz, bossa nova, samba. You've got to have your Latin styles. And a little drum roll there. And there's even space for you to write your own patterns too. So 4 years on, 1983, and Boss doubles the DR-55 and comes out with the DR-110, the Dr.Rhythm graphic. And it has addressed many of the shortcomings of the original Dr.Rhythm, but plastic case, it's definitely not as well made as the original, but it has several advancements. Some of the features are the same. For example, it has a trigger out based on the accent. The way that you program it is very similar, but you have this quite nice big display, somewhat like a TR-505 or a TR-707, so that you can see exactly what you've programmed. And you can also start to do a bit of finger drumming. The Dr.Rhythm graphic has 6 different sounds. It's got a hand clap even, which is a really good hand clap. It's got a cymbal. kind of a ride, very nice. Open and close hi-hat. As you can tell, it sounds a bit like a Roland 606. The snare drum and the bass drum, however, not quite as strong. Let's play a full beat. There's a tempo control. The balance kind of goes between the bass drum and the snare drum and the hi-hat, so as you turn it, it becomes a bit brighter sounding. It's not quite a tone control, and it's not quite like having individual volume levels for each of the drums, but it's good enough to get the kind of mix of sounds that you want. Now this thing has a song mode, and you can write patterns in step time, or you can tap them in real time this time if you want. This particular unit I've modified also with a DIN sync input. Again, it's quite handy for syncing to other drum machines. It's quite nice working that really good clap sound into your other rhythms. If you look here, the start and stop button have the filled dot and the unfilled dot, just like the original Boss DR-55. They kept that symbology, and they used the same thing for when you do step right. You program it in with the same interface actually that the DR-55 had, just with a lot more visual kind of aids. Let's actually program a pattern now, and you can see how that all works. So we want to go into step right mode, and we clear the pattern. So this time we'll do a 4 to the floor. Let's choose the bass drum, and you program each of the 16 steps using the 2 circle buttons, just like the DR-55. And it's a lot easier being able to see it on this display. Let's do a snare drum now. If we want to play what we've done, we can slip back into pattern play mode, or we can even go into tap right mode. Now we can jam along in real time. Let's play what we've got. Well, I don't like that, but I can erase the snare drum by pressing clear button whilst it's playing. That's a big advancement. But there is a disadvantage with that. On other drum machines, when you clear instruments in that way, it does it straight away. On the DR-110, unfortunately, it lags by a bar, so you kind of have to plan in advance. Especially if you make a mistake, you have to keep listening to it. Still got your trigger out for your Volca sync or what have you. Let's program an accent in so you can hear how that sounds. You get a bit more out of the accent compared to the DR-55. All in all, a very nice little analog drum machine. Runs on batteries. Sounds pretty good. Sounds a bit like a 606. Not quite as punchy, but it does have that hand clap. Would have been nice to have a nice super giggable metal case, but I guess the 80s had started. They want to cheapen this down, focus on the kind of budget market. Now 2 years have passed, and it is 1985, and digital technology is taking off, and Boss decides to use it to release not one Dr.Rhythm follow-up, but 2. And again, they've doubled the model number, so it was DR-55, 110, and now 220. These come in rather nice silver cases. Actually, the DR-110 comes in a similar case, but my unit doesn't have one of those anymore. It's very neatly packaged again. You've got your drum machine, you've got yourself a nice pouch with your presets, manual and that sort of thing. As I said, they released 2 of them. This is the DR-220A, which has acoustic drum sounds. And they also released a DR-220E. And the E stands for electric, and the drum sounds are similar to like a Simmons drum kit. Let's start by having a look at the DR-220A. Again, there's a lot of similarities with earlier models in the series. You can clearly see the evolution. You've got the fill dot and the empty dot, just like the original DR-55 and the DR-110. You've got yourself 11 drum sounds plus an accent that you can play. Drum sounds in this thing are super punchy. Similar probably to a TR-707, I would have thought. The pads are very playable. Just like on the other Dr.Rhythms, you've got yourself a trigger output, but this also has a trigger input. And again, it's compatible with your Korg Volcas, so you can still use it in a modern setup. The graphic display isn't quite as detailed as the DR-110. You can only see one instrument at a time, as opposed to a larger number of them on the DR-110. But you do have more editing features for your song mode and that sort of thing. Let's hear an example pattern. Very metal. And it's also pretty easy to program in your own patterns. You can go into step right mode, clear your pattern, and then again use the same interface as the OG DR-55 to populate each sound. But this time, if you don't like it, you can go forwards and backwards, which makes things quite a lot more fun. Let's have a listen to what we programmed there. Again, it's just a bar. Only the DR-55 has that handy switch with the variation and the 2 bar. But you can jam over the top of it in real time as well. I'll just turn the tempo up a bit. This time you can adjust the individual levels of each instrument. There's a level control. And the whole thing kind of looks like a ruler, and it's very attractive. You can clear instruments in the same way, but it has the same problem as the DR-110 in that it clears it for the bar after. So you have to plan ahead a bit. But it's a very cool piece, beautifully presented, just like the DR-55 and the DR-110. Let's have a look at its brother, the DR-220E. Now this is pretty much exactly the same, except that the sounds are based on a Simmons drum kit, which was kind of big in the mid-80s. This particular unit is a little bit sick, and not all the buttons respond as you might expect. But I'll give you a quick demo of the sounds anyway. I definitely think the sounds in the 220E are cooler. It's quite rare that you have a drum machine dedicated to these kind of electric Simmons style drums. But it really works. And it has the same features as the other one, trigger input and output. All the editing's exactly the same. It's a little bit rarer, and so it's a little bit more expensive, but all of these units are super affordable actually. So that's the Boss DR-220E and DR-220A. So some more years have passed. It's 1990 now, and out comes the boss DR-550. This is actually the DR-550 Mark II, which came out a couple of years later. But they're nearly the same machine. The Mark II does have some more sounds, and that actually includes some 808 and 909 sounds. It's a very similar machine in a lot of ways to the DR-220. The way you program the beats with this single instrument display is similar. You do have a lot more sounds. You don't have those handy trigger in and outs anymore, but you do have this quite nice dial here for setting the volume. Let's have a play with some of the sounds. That's my favorite kit. You've got those big 80s tom sounds still if you want. 808 hi-hats. That, believe it or not, is a 909 kick drum. 808 cowbell. Electronic sounding claps. And this thing has a MIDI input as well, so you can sync MIDI clock to this thing, or what I do very often is, because I find this machine quite charming, I love the sounds and stuff in it, so I quite often use it just as a little sound module. It still runs on batteries. All the Dr.Rhythms until this point run on batteries. That changes in the next iteration. It's quite an alias sounding 808. Kick that. So if you still want those 80s drum sounds, this does have them. It's a very breakbeaty, that snare, isn't it? 808 snare. 909 snare. And you do actually have some options to modify the sounds. You've got a color option, which is kind of like a weird filter. I assume it's a comb filter, because that would have been quite easy to implement. You can adjust the decay of each sound. You also have two mute groups for your hi-hats. You can set the amount that the accent affects the sound by, and you can set the panning from left to right. So generally how I have this, I have all the sounds except for the kick in the right output and the kick in the left. That way I can apply effects as I like on the other sounds. If you want to back your patterns and your pad assignments up, you can use a tape interface. That's something I've never explored, although maybe I should, because it does take a while to program the pads and stuff as you'd like. Let's quickly edit a pattern so you can see what you do. And step edit works in a very similar way to the DR-220 actually. Programmed in the kick drum there. Let's do the snare next. This time you don't have the two dots to play your sounds in like the other boss Dr.Rhythms, but the programming is extremely logical from someone who's used the DR-220. It becomes quite it's quite intuitive, although compared to like a 808 or any of those other in the Roland TR series, it is a bit clunky still. Let's have a listen. But it does sound good, this little thing. I do like it, and I like the charming size of it. This is probably my second favourite Dr.Rhythm. My first is obviously the OG DR-55. Finally, they fixed when you try and clear the notes in real time, it clears them immediately with this thing. It's all a bit awkward though, because you're still limited to 1 bar as your atomic unit. So although you can make a song if you want, you can't do a pattern chain. Still, overall, my second favorite Dr.Rhythm, and definitely one to check out. So here we are, the Boss Dr.Rhythm DR-660. The original DR-550 was released in 1990. Then in 1992, they released the Mark II of the DR-550, which we've just looked at. And they also released this machine, which is a thoroughly different beast, the DR-660. This has a ton of features. It's a real powerhouse, actually. You've got MIDI in and out. You can actually use this as a rudimentary sequencer. I believe Square Pusher produced his first album using this as the sequencer. You've got left and right main outputs, but you've also got 2 individual outputs, which is incredible, really. It's also got built-in effects. It's got a built-in reverb and, bizarrely, a built-in chorus, but the chorus, it sounds all right. You've also got a couple of synth bass sounds, which, in my opinion, don't sound very good, but they are there to be used. The entire interface has had a complete makeover from Roger Lynn, of all people. And when you're using it, it does sort of feel like you're using a junior MPC, if you like. I do like the way that this thing has implemented the rhythms. You can kind of do fills in between the normal beat and then going into a variation, which I'll demonstrate to you now. And that's really cool for jamming, actually. It's quite nice to do a set with the Dr.Rhythm DR-660 because you can program in yourself each of those 4 pattern types. You can program in your ordinary, your variation, and your 2 fills to go between your ordinary and variation. You can program those completely by hand. This thing has quite a handy data wheel, which none of the others have. You can also have patterns which last more than 1 bar. For example, this beat is 4 bars long. But annoyingly, you can't append patterns on top of each other to extend the length, which is a shame, really. It has complete 808 and 909 drum kits. Let's play some of the built-in styles. This is rap. You can clearly hear it's making good use of that 808 kit. It's got swing as well for the first time. Let's see what disco sounds like. Very home keyboard, that one. I'm sure you could rev it up though. There's definitely better sounds than those on here. Let's try hard rock. Fair enough. Let's try rap 2. Kind of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air type vibes. Clearly it has a load of Latin patterns as well. Let's try reggae, see what that sounds like. Probably good enough for songwriting, that's for sure. I'm not sure that it sounds quite as good as the DR-550. Maybe I'm just kind of fooling myself because I like the DR-550 so much. This is meant to have 16-bit samples, but it definitely has a kind of early 90s, slightly kind of muddy tone, a bit sort of audio cassette type quality. This is definitely the one to get if you're interested in doing more advanced sequencing. You can change the notes each pad is mapped to, and you can totally use it to sequence an external sampler like Square Pusher did, or even a synth or something of that nature. And the way that the patterns are arranged with the ordinary and variation, I think, is quite cool as well. It's definitely a lot easier to edit than any of the earlier ones in the series. Roger Lynn did a great job of bringing the editing up to some sort of industry standard. Unfortunately, it doesn't have batteries, but you can't have everything. It does have built-in effects, those two separate outputs, MIDI in and out. It's a quality bit of kit, basically. Well, I hope that trip through the Boss Dr.Rhythm range was interesting for you. Like I said, these are my favourites. The OG Dr.Rhythm DR-55 as used by Depeche Mode, Sisters of Mercy and many others. Plus I like this thing here, the DR-550. It's cute, it's cheap and cheerful, it's got battery power and it's got some 808 and 909 sounds as well. Plus those 80s electric drums from the DR-220 are in there as well. Hope you found that interesting. I hope you'll also like and subscribe if that wasn't too boring. There's plenty of similar stuff on the gwEm YouTube channel, a bit of retro, a bit of old, bit of new, some jams. Be good to see you in another video soon. Take care and thanks a lot.